Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siding, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher, on this Chamber of Commerce Day here in New Orleans. It is absolutely beautiful. Spring day here in New Orleans, sun shining, low humidity, the temperature's like, can we do this all year round? It's just wonderful. I'll tell you what, can we have this for French Quarter Fest and Jazz Fest? That would be enough, right? That would be beautiful. But again, a great day here in New Orleans and a great day here on Inside New Orleans Sports because we bring back Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints podcast, Saints' previous appearance on this program during training camp. He broke all records on the internet. No one has watched this program more on the internet than when Ross Jackson was here. And we got some pretty good guests that we've had in the past who obviously get a chance to, get a lot of views on the internet. No, Ross broke the internet on that day, and he's back with us today. And of course, we'll talk a lot of Saints today. It'll be a Saints-heavy show. We will touch on the Pels and their situation. I'll let you know what's happening in college baseball, and of course, we'll talk a little bit about the Final Four and what's happening with the Lady Tigers as they are in the women's Final Four. So we've got a great show for you today. Ross, welcome back to the show, my friend, and always good to have you. By the way, Ross is with us each and every week on our radio show on a Thursday. It's been a great relationship here, and thanks for coming down. Certainly appreciate it.
Absolutely, not a problem at all. Very excited to be here with you as always. I'm gonna tell you a little secret.
Go ahead.
All those views in the last, it's just me refreshing.
You're just refreshing
over and over. It's just me.
It's my secret. I do it all the time. You got to get those views, right? He's not telling the truth.
No.
But Ross, before we get started, tell folks about what you're involved in. I know you and I were just talking about, again, the fact that you could come home, cover the home team. And I'll tell you what, it's been a meteoric rise for Ross within this industry. Again, jumping on, doing the podcast, and of course, that podcast blowing up, and now doing his writings with several other publications. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's been a phenomenal journey, like I mentioned, to be able to come back home and to be able to speak to the people in my city. Who are excited about the same thing that I'm excited about. I mean, I grew up watching Saints football. I grew up watching, New Orleans sports. And so to be able to, come back home and be able to share that with the people that are most impacted by it and the people that I care most about and that I have the tightest connections with, it just means the world. So the Locked On Saints podcast is every Monday through Friday, there with you daily, always ready for you in the morning. So it's a nice quick 30 minutes getting you up to date and with everything, no fluff, nothing like that. Right. Just make sure you get the news. Yes. Make sure you get to know what you need to know. I'll get my opinion in there too.
Of course.
I'll get my opinion in there too.
Of course.
And then of course all the writing over at CrescentCitySports.com and SaintsWire.usatoday.com.
They do a great job. And again, let me recommend the podcast to anybody out there that enjoys Saints football. And you may be one of those persons saying, I don't have time to listen to podcasts. You got time to listen to Ross' podcast. As he mentioned, he has jam-packed, again, in a short amount of time, all the information you need to know about your Saints going forward. And when we get to camp, oh, kid me. Again, doing again the podcast, let you know what's going on. So again, we're lucky to have him here in the city. Ross, let's start with the Saints. 7-10 last year. They've kind of put that to bed. The biggest, obviously, the biggest changeover I think in the city right now is the feeling of, again, that maybe they got a real chance to turn this thing around this year. And it starts again with the quarterback, with Derek Carr. A lot of people maybe are still iffy on whether Dennis Allen is the coach to bring them to the next level. But again, he has an opportunity now to bring in his own coaching staff. Yep. He has an opportunity now to, again, kind of make this team in his own image, which, again, you want a coach to do. So we'll see how that goes. We'll talk about him in a little while. But it really kind of changed on Derek Carr coming here. Do you agree with that? And if you do, what does he bring to the table for this team?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, that was the move, the Saints signing Derek Carr, and doing it a week before free agency opened up, which gave a little bit of recruiting time and all those other things to get done. That move in particular is the thing to me that signals that the New Orleans Saints are on their way to improvement in 2023. Do I think they're done? No, not at all. Obviously, they have a lot left to do here, but Derek Carr was a fantastic first step. And I think one of the things that you look at in terms of him and what he brings to the team in 2023 is that you get a composed quarterback that's got a lot of experience. He's a 9-year veteran, seen it all, can call the protections, which we know was a big issue for the Saints last year, right? Not being able to make those pre-snap calls, those responsibilities being shared between the quarterback and center. Now you're back into sort of the Drew Brees-like approach, not necessarily in performance, but in terms of that quarterback being able to get to the line of scrimmage, call out the protections, get everything set up, identify where the blitzes are coming from, where pressure is coming from, change the play if necessary at the line of scrimmage. He's the type of guy that you can give 2 play calls, 3 play calls to, and then let him make the choice at the line of scrimmage. He is that type of high IQ player, which the Saints just simply haven't been able to have under center for the past couple of years since Drew Brees left. Some of that is experience with the system or similar systems. Others is just simply skill set, right? And so that is a really improved skill set, or a spot where the Saints have now greatly improved is their pre-snap management at the line of scrimmage. That's a big piece. Being calm under pressure. He's one of the best in-game quarterbacks in the NFL. That we saw be an issue for the Saints just as recent as last year. And a team also, or a quarterback that can place the passes into tight windows, throw players open, be a spot thrower, get this team back to what allowed them to move the ball years ago in a more efficient manner as opposed to an explosive manner. Nobody wants to compare him to Drew Brees, who's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Of course. But it's hard not to, okay, because you look at everything you just mentioned, that's Brees-like, right? You look at the opening press conference. If you shut your eyes and then you think back to the Drew Brees opening press conference, or you think of the press conference of Drew Brees we have become accustomed to, he reminds you a lot of Brees, even to the family, right? I mean, I mean, all the way down. I don't want to say it's a Brees clone, but again, because look, the performance is not there. But remember, coming out of San Diego, Brees wasn't Brees until he really got here. But talk about the similarities and what they bring to the table, on and off the field. Because another part of this is, again, the preparation, right? Absolutely, and that's such a big part of what Derek Carr talked about during his intro press conference. He talked about how he didn't want to be ready for Sunday. He wanted to be ready for Wednesday, so that they could have a solid week of practice and they'd be ready. That sounds so familiar, doesn't it? When I was listening to it, I'm like, this guy sounds like Brees. Yeah, it was really remarkable. And so, is the performance going to be on the same level of Brees? We can't make that comparison. Say that. But just in terms of what you're seeing in terms of the intangibles as a leader, as a guy that without a doubt is going to be a team captain in 2023, all those things. He is the leadership that the New Orleans Saints were looking for going into this offseason. They wanted somebody that could be an effective leader and somebody that brought a lot of work ethic. And you see both of those things in Derek Carr on and off the field. Right. When you look at him, strengths in his game, again, we've heard, I think he's got more comebacks than any other player that's active in the NFL right now. What do you think the strengths of his game are right now? Yeah, I think high-level processing. Right, being a spot thrower, being able to throw receivers open. He's the type of guy that you can put fantastic receivers around, and he can make them a little bit better. He doesn't. I don't know that he can elevate them the same way that Drew Brees would elevate a Marcus Colston or an undrafted receiver or anything like that. But he can still make them a little bit better because he can put passes where they need to be. He can be one of those guys that places passes really well in contested catch situations to make it, instead of a 50-50 ball, a 55-45, and that makes such a big difference in terms of your ability to be able to produce with those receivers. So I think there's that part in terms of the strength of his game. I think the fact that he is somebody that doesn't get visibly rattled, he's somebody that doesn't mind pressure. He doesn't mind those in-game situations, just that calm, cool composure, which, everyone will remember that one of the big things that, the Saints talked about when it came to Andy Dalton was having that calming presence.
Right.
And some of that played true throughout the rest of the season, but there was a lot of times where you kind of went, wow, I wonder where that calming presence is. Derek Carr has that calming presence, and he is that guy, And so I do think that he brings all of those things as strengths when it comes to, what the Saints are wanting to do. Full field reads, full field progressions, being able to make all those pre-snap adjustments, understanding post-snap adjustments as well. Right. Him and Michael Thomas, if Michael Thomas is able to stay healthy throughout the season, them being on the same page post-snap is going to be huge. This safety's playing a little bit shallow, so he's going to bend that route upfield a little bit more than he usually would. Or maybe the safety has a lot of depth, so he's going to curl the route a little bit differently than he would. Derek Carr and Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Juwan Johnson, Alvin Kamara, all these guys that are going to be out there on the offense, at least for some portion of time, they will need to be able to see the field the same way that their quarterback sees the field, and the Saints have just sort of heightened the not only expectations but the possibilities of that happening.
Best quarterback on the market when they struck?
Absolutely, was Derek Carr. I mean, everything that I had heard, and many of us had heard when we were in Indianapolis during the Combine, was that the backup plan was going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. Right. I think there's a pretty good gap between those two players,
I would agree.
Personally. Yeah. And so, you look at him, you look at another guy like Sam Darnold, who actually ended up in San Francisco. Right. You look at some of the other guys that were available, like Baker Mayfield, who's back in the conference, but now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's a big gap between Derek Carr and those guys. And then, there were a lot of folks who sort of looked at, well, what about Lamar Jackson? What about Aaron Rodgers? We're now hearing that Lamar Jackson requested a trade in early March, but does he actually get traded? Would you really have wanted to wait through 4, 5, 6 weeks of free agency to make a move on a quarterback? I don't think so. And so I do think that they not only landed the best quarterback that was available at that time, but made the right decision in going to get that quarterback.
The league is going toward more mobile quarterbacks, the more really kind of mimicking what we're seeing on the collegiate game. He is more of a old school type quarterback, pocket pass, etc. Has some mobility, but not a running quarterback. Are you surprised they went in that direction, or is that the direction you felt they might go because of, again, coming from Breeze to, again, and the way this offense kind of works? Yeah, with the retention of Pete Carmichael at offensive coordinator over the course of the offseason, it seemed unlikely that going towards a mobile quarterback was going to be their MO going into 2023. Last year, before the season began, they pursued Deshaun Watson, who has some of those mobile tendencies and can pick up yards for you with his legs, but he is very much a passer first type quarterback and would have been a pocket passer who can extend plays with his legs. Now, look, Derek Carr's no Jalen Hurts, but he is a little bit of a Joe Burrow in that if he does get, a spot where he sees some green grass, he can pick up some yardage for you and everything. So he can do a little bit of that, not to the extent of, what we're seeing the NFL turn to. So now the next question is that the Saints didn't change their offensive mold to fit the changing tide of the quarterback play in the NFL. But are they now able to make the right decisions over on defense to deal with those mobile quarterbacks? But in terms of not making that change over on the offensive side, not wildly surprising considering their decision to maintain continuity in terms of their offensive approach. One thing that was surprising is the retention of Jameis Winston. I've said this on social media, I've said it on a radio and TV show. I would have bet my house he would have ended up elsewhere. Okay, how do you think that went down? Why do you think he returned? Now, I got someone that has been. Well, he works out over at GLS on the West Bank with the GOTA situation over there with Gary Scheffler, and Gary's told me again he loves New Orleans. He doesn't want to leave New Orleans. Was it that? Was it there was no market for him? Was it? What do you think the reason? Because look, when you come out and call your coach out in the middle of the season saying, "Hey, I lost my job due to injury," and that's not the way we do it in the NFL. At that that point, I thought that's a divorce that was going to happen. What's your take?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say I'm glad you didn't bet your house.
Yeah, I did.
I don't want you to have to deal with that.
I really don't bet, but that's okay.
But, you know, I think that the thing that I look at here is the reason for him sticking around. I think there are several different things that factor in. I do believe that he loves New Orleans. I think he showed you that. He was out, you know, for Carnival season all around and everything. He was there for the HBCU Legacy Bowl. He's had such a big, him and Teron Armstead, who came back to New Orleans to be a part of that. They have such a big, you know, foothold in that event. And HBCU just culture as a whole.
Absolutely.
And so I think that, you know, he's done a lot to show you that he does love it here in the city of New Orleans, that he wants to contribute to that. But I think it's also completely warranted to say there were no starting roles available out there. And if you're going to be a backup to somebody, do you want to end up being a backup somewhere where, and even if you did get a slight starting opportunity, it's an Alex Smith role at best. You're going for a couple of games until that rookie quarterback is ready. You know, you look at the other quarterbacks that answered their quarterback questions already this offseason by the time that he was, you know, eventually going to be out on the market. And you look at the quarterbacks, the teams that hadn't, the Raiders, the Houston Texans, Carolina Panthers, and then of course the Indianapolis Colts, for instance, they're all in position to take their next quarterback. And so did you want to go somewhere where you started 4 games maybe, or where you played mentor to a young quarterback in a system that you weren't familiar with? Or do you want to stick around, be in a place that you love, be in a place that you're accustomed to, continue to work towards improving that team, and be in a place where you feel comfortable in terms of what the offensive system is in case you do get called into action? And I think that was a big part of his decision-making process as well. And he's probably still recovering, if we're being honest. I mean, he mentioned the injuries in his letter to New Orleans about why he stayed. And so I think, you know, staying somewhere that understands your injury, that, you know, the team voted, I believe they got an A+ or at least an A when it came to their team facilities as well as their team medical staff. Clearly that medical staff is doing something right. They've saved something like 4 lives over since 2017. And as much grief as, you know, people like to give the medical staff for, you know, certain things like connecting to the Michael Thomas injury and things like that, they've done a fantastic job getting these guys back out on the field. Maybe not at the timeline that you'd like, but that's not up to them, that's up to the players' bodies. And so I think that Jameis sticking around here in New Orleans had a lot to do with his ability to be able to recover in a place that understands what it is that he's suffering with over the course of the past couple of years.
I'm not trying to put the whammy on Derek Carr here, I'm really not. But he's been a guy that doesn't miss a lot of games. So if you're Jameis Winston, you're backing up somebody who doesn't miss a lot of games. You were the anointed starter last year, and now again you're the backup. How does that play in the locker room? How does that play between? How does that play with Jameis Winston, knowing that probably only getting on the field if ultimately he's injured, or maybe if he falters as a quarterback?
Yeah, I think it's the same situation he was in last year with Andy Dalton, right? I mean, it was a similar situation to where there was just no shot that Jameis was going to be back out there unless Andy Dalton completely melted down, which he kind of did during that Arizona Cardinals Thursday night game, which was the game before the Saints effectively said, Andy Dalton is our starter going forward. We'll let you know if anything changes.
Which everybody went crazy after that.
And so if they were willing to anoint him the starter after that game, then what was really going to take Andy Dalton off the field to put Jameis Winston back on? And I'll tell you, like being in the locker room and seeing Jameis and seeing the guys that are around him, nothing changed. Nothing changed. He was just as invested. He was just as, you know, the community of players was still there. I know a lot of people were concerned about the locker room and everything last year. There was nothing in that locker room that translated to there being an issue. And it's hard to hide from the people that are in the locker rooms, right? Like we know, we can see it. And none of that impacted anything at all. So I would expect the same thing here, you know, looking at what the situation is between Jameis Winston and Derek Carr.
They really don't have a third quarterback. Again, I believe it's going to be a big man draft for them. You know, they've got to get better on the defensive side of the ball. We'll get to that a little bit later on. Do you think there's an opportunity to pick a rookie and to groom that rookie, especially with Jameis on a 1-year deal? And if it is, everybody, again, myself included, really likes Hendon Hooker. But we talked about they're not playing a system that really, again, kind of goes to Hendon Hooker's strengths. With that said, what do you think about the drafting of a quarterback? And if they did, where would they, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the idea of drafting a quarterback has become a little bit less likely, but not impossible. Right? I mean, if you find somebody at the right spot that has the right value, sort of like what happened with Ian Book a few years
There you
ago.
go.
They liked him. He was available at a spot where they
Right.
felt comfortable taking him, and so they took him. Didn't work out, but they took him.
Yes.
So I could see the Saints going that route, something like a mid-round pick to a late-round pick, but not necessarily investing in the first couple of rounds. But, you know, what's your real success rate if you wait to draft a quarterback?
Right.
I mean, the success rate around the NFL is not very good at all. I mean, Doug Mouton over at WWL did a fantastic job of breaking down,
Yes.
you know, post round 2, 75 quarterbacks have been taken in the last 10 years. One of them is a bona fide starter in the NFL, and it's Dak Prescott.
Right.
And some people would tell you he's not a bona fide starter in the NFL, depending
Right.
upon who you're talking about. Now, we don't know about Brock Purdy yet. We
Right.
got to wait and see.
Sure, of course.
But in the first 2 rounds, 50% hit rate there over the last 10 years. And so it depends on what you're going to draft for. One guy that I really, really like later that makes a lot of sense for the Saints just in terms of his mental processing, his leadership,
Right.
culture, all those things is Max Duggan
Okay.
out of TCU.
All right.
And I love Hendon Hooker.
Right.
And I think if you're there at 40 and he's there and it all aligns
Right.
in terms of what your board says, then it's worth rolling the dice. I don't care that he's 25 years old.
Me
I like
neither.
him. Yeah, I
Come
like a mature quarterback.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And so I think that that's still a possibility,
Right.
but a lot more unlikely than maybe rolling the dice on a guy later on in the draft that maybe becomes a Chase Daniel-like quarterback for you over time.
The only problem is at 40, I mean, you look at, I mean, you have some needs here, okay?
Yeah, and there's a lot of good players there.
And there are, again, but at the same time, yeah, look, it is what it is. Do you want to take a chance on a young player? How do you feel about Derek Carr? Obviously, we know how they do, but again, the contract was very cap friendly and set up again that they can get out after 2 years if they feel like again it's not going in the direction they want to. We'll see how that plays out. When you look at the biggest need now, as we've and the Saints pretty much Dennis Allen said this at the owners meeting this week, that they're kind of turning their attention now to the draft.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to get back to free. I'll talk about free agency in a few minutes, but biggest need now that's left on this team as they go into the draft, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think you have to look over to the defensive side, and it's still the same story from the beginning of the season. That defensive line is a huge need for this team. They did a great job in free agency in recovering from the exodus that took place on the defensive interior. Shai Tuttle headed to the Panthers, David Onyemata headed to the Falcons. But they bring in Colin Saunders, who was one of my favorite prospects in the 2019 draft. Hyper athletic, 324-pound guy that can do backflips for you. I'm maybe 150 wet, and I can't do a backflip. And this guy's out here, doing what he's got to do.
I'm not doing any backflips.
And so, I think he's a great prospect for him. And then Nathan Shepard that they bring in, he gives you. David Onyemata last year ranked in 26 when it came to pass rush win rate. Pass rush win rate effectively looks at how often defensive linemen win their one-on-one matchups with a pass blocker.
Yes.
And he was 26th in the NFL, David Onyemata was. Nathan Shepard comes in at 10. Big time jump up, but they're about the same when it comes to run stop win rate and how often they're involved in the run game. So you kind of stay static in terms of what the run game was for you last year, which doesn't put a lot of points on the board for opposing offenses. You'd rather be strong against the pass and weak against the run than weak against the pass and strong against the run. Yes. And so, but I look at Nathan Shepard as somebody that gives you a big time improvement as a pass rusher on the interior. So I think that attacking nature is there, but I still think you have a lot to fill out. You have a guy in Prince Amelli who's not really taking a snap for you. He was on your practice squad last year. He's on your reserve future deals now. You got 2 new free agents that haven't taken snaps in this defense, and then you've got Malcolm Roach coming back as effectively your veteran leader, right? In a 3rd, 4th year in the NFL.
Right.
And so I think you still have to get some work done there. And I think you're still looking for a starter opposite Cam Jordan, if you can find one as an edge rusher to compete with Carl Granderson.
When you look at 29, a lot of big men are usually drafted around there because you got guys falling, right? There's a run on quarterbacks, and then you see the run on receivers we've seen recently, right, in the first round. Running backs have kind of been devalued, but offensive tackles are huge. Defensive ends. To me, 29, you'll see maybe again one of the top offensive guards fall. I know they just interviewed the kid from Florida within the last couple days. Also, again, possibly defensive tackle is another one you could look at there at 29 as well. What do you think that they're going to be looking at? Is it the big man? Is it the receiver that falls to them there that they can't walk away from? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think it depends on who that receiver is, honestly. honestly,
Yeah.
that could be really appealing.
Right.
If Jordan Addison falls, if a Jackson Smith-Njigba falls, remember he had an injury that kept him out for the entire 2022 college season.
Right.
And he has the potential to take a Justin Jefferson type tumble because of his sort of what I would call I'll call it maybe misdiagnosis of him as a slot receiver.
Okay.
Right? When he can play on the outside and he can do both. And so, if a guy like Jackson Smith-Njigba doesn't necessarily fall to 29, but falls into the 20s,
right.
We know this team is aggressive if they like
Absolutely.
a guy, right? They looked at Chris Olave and said, we can't leave the draft without him, so what did they do? They traded up for him.
Right.
They made sure that they got him. And so, I could see one of those guys be really, really hard to pass up on if they start to take the tumble. But the trenches makes a lot of sense, and this is a team that has always invested in the trenches and loves to invest in the trenches early, especially in strong wide receiver drafts. And so I look at right now guys like Osiris Torrance, the offensive lineman that's out of Florida. You've got Andrus Peat, who's now on a one-year deal. I mean, he's on a contract year at this point, after he effectively took a pay cut and they restructured and renegotiated his deal. So he's in a contract year. Are they going to pick up Cesar Ruiz's fifth-year option?
Right.
We don't know yet, right? And they don't have to make that decision until after they see how their draft goes.
Sure.
And so investing in a guy like Osiris Torrance maybe helps you not have to over-invest in the two guys that are here right now and instead wait to see how things play out. So I could absolutely see a guy like Osiris Torrance out of Florida, the guard, ending up maybe being the Saints pick at 29 if he makes it there. Otherwise, defensive tackle makes a ton of sense. There's a lot of great names. Kalijah Cansey, the hyper-athletic, though undersized, but, I mean, you watch this kid play, you watch this guy test. He's one of those guys where you go, okay, if it's going to work for anybody in the NFL at his size, it's him.
Is that the kid from Pittsburgh?
He's from Pittsburgh.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's phenomenal. Has had great pro days, great workouts, had a great season, all that. So he could be a guy that could be there at 29 or in the 20s, in striking distance for a trade. I look at Mozzie Smith, the big defensive tackle out of Michigan, who can be disruptive in the pass rush game, who is also a great run stopper as well, and even some other guys that they could wait a little while longer and go Baylor Siaki Ika, Tuipulotu coming out of USC, who slimmed down. He could be a guy that they have on the outside.
And where do you think they go?
Versatility. There's a lot of good stuff there.
Where do you think they go? Second round? Are those second round guys?
Those are
first?
guys that could creep into second round, but the thing about it is that you look at them as second round grades.
Okay.
You usually only have 12 to 15 real first round grades on your big board.
Yes.
So if you have a second round grade that you really like, that's one of those guys, and the other defensive tackles come off the board, you can't rule them out at 29.
And we're going to get into free agency when we come back from the break, but I like what they've done. But I think after you see what happened last year when they had the drop off in terms of the ability to stop the run and how it affected all three levels of the defense, that has to be a priority this year. You have to be able to have a team that can stop the run. Yes, you got to find another defensive end. Maybe you're doing that after the draft with maybe some of these defensive ends that are kind of holding out, and they have the money to spend now that they can do that, even though those guys are expensive. But I really feel like, again, you've got to invest in the interior of the defensive line, and you've got to get better on the offensive line. You've had a lot of injuries there, had a lot of guys that, again, you've invested a lot. Those guys have not really panned out like you really felt like they could have. So, again, maybe you have to reset there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you look at this sort of position group by position group for the Saints over the course of the offseason. I won't run through all of them, but quarterback, you definitely improved. And I think maybe wide receiver and running back, you can fairly say they've improved, but
yeah, they could use some more help, right?
They could use more help. And then over on the defensive side, you look at where they've mostly stayed the same. They improved their depth big time at safety and really at DB as a whole. But your starting group is effectively the same. You probably came down a little bit at linebacker after losing Caden Ellis, so you'd like to find some more quality depth there. And in the defensive line, you might say they've broken even so far. So there's still absolutely spots for them to continue to develop, continue to improve over the course of this offseason, whether it's through the draft or, as you mentioned, these free agents that can be available after the draft, which don't count into your compensatory pick formula, which helps a ton, and puts you in a situation to where you can, come to these guys late in free agency, just like they did with guys like Jarvis Landry, Tyrann Mathieu last year.
I want you, before we go to break, I want you to explain the compensatory pick. Saints have not been big players in compensatory picks. But this year, they have I don't want to say a boatload, but they have quite a few compensatory picks. Last year, they could have got 2 third-round compensatory picks, and they decided not to go in that direction and went for the players that were on the market at that time. Do you think they will value compensatory picks? And if you would explain to the audience how that works.
Yeah. So compensatory picks are draft picks that are awarded to teams based upon what it is that they lost in free agency versus what they gained in free agency. So every player is given effectively a point value that's based upon where their ranking is in terms of their average per year contract. They do that in reverse order. And then the percent of snaps that are played, and then whether or not they got, Pro Bowl or rather All Pro, and then some PFWA awards that award points as well. And so based upon that point value, an upper 5 to 0 or 5 to 1 percentile are rewarded third round selections, and then it just kind of works down that way through all the way through the 7th round. So the Saints right now, based upon their losses and gains so far this season, have 2 4th-round compensatory selections and a potential 6th-round compensatory selection that they're in line for. And so if they pump the brakes right now on the big contracts, and you start, keep signing guys on these sort of, veteran 1-year deals, which is what Brian Edwards' contract is, for instance, because he could cut into the 6th-round compensatory selection depending upon where his contract level falls, then the Saints could walk away with 3 additional selections in next year's draft, which could end up impacting how they treat this year's draft, because that means that they have some opportunity to leverage some of those future picks that they already have, knowing that they may get awarded some later in some trade-ups later on this season. So you can see them really working around that compensatory pick formula so far this year. But after the draft and after May 1st, nothing factors into that any longer. And so that ends up being a big time for them to get into the play.
I'm not a guy that likes to see the Saints take one of their picks, that their regular picks, to move up, but I have no problem in using a compensatory pick to be able to be able to move up and try to go for a player. The Saints, obviously, again, they don't care. They see a player, they're going, they'll do what they have to do. Sometimes overpaying it as well. All right, Ross Jackson is with us, Locked On Saints podcast, Saints Wire, also again, CrescentCitySports.com. We'll take a break here. We come back and touch on the Pels for a couple minutes. I'll give you the update on what's happening with college baseball, and then we're going to jump back into the Saints. We'll talk about what they've done in free agency. We're going to get Ross's take on, again, the guys they brought in, the losses as well, and then again, maybe we'll get a little bit deeper into the draft going forward, and maybe I'll get a prognosis on what we can see going forward, especially after the draft, in terms of, again, filling out this roster. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Ross Jackson is our guest. We'll be right back.
Conditioning, heating, and refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhardt has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhardt's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhardt's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhardt's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Pleased to have Ross Jackson with us today. Locked On Saints podcast, Saints Wire, and also CrescentCitySports.com. Let me give you an update on college baseball quickly. LSU is still #1 in the nation. They're 20-2. They are second place in the SEC West right now. They have split with Arkansas 2 of 3, and also Texas A&M. They have their series with Tennessee starts today. It's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. Tulane continues to struggle. They're 6-19. They're last place in the American Athletic Conference. They lost to UNO last night in the Pelican Cup. UNO gets the Pelican Cup. They have a 3-game set against Memphis at home. The Privateers are 14-11. They're 1-2 in the Southland, and that's 6th place right now. They beat Tulane last night, as mentioned. Northwestern State comes to town for a 3-game set in their conference opener out on the lakefront. SLU is 15-10, 1st place in the Southland. They beat Mississippi Valley last night. They have a 3-game home opener against Incarnate Word up in Hammond, America, and then Nichols last night loses to South Alabama. They're at home with 3 against Lamar. They are 15-12, and of course in 6th place in the Southland. Also, the situation right now with the Lady Tigers are they're in the Final Four. They play the 6 o'clock game against Virginia Tech, who is the #1 seed on Friday night. Of course, when you look at the Lady Tigers, again, a remarkable turnaround in terms of the program with just, again, Kim Mulkey only being there 2 years, going in the transfer portal this year, getting 9 players, including Angel Reese and Poole, the kid out of Ohio State, that just really turned this entire season around. And again, everybody again pulling for the Tigers to get in the Final Four. If they do, it's probably going to be South Carolina, who takes on Iowa in the 2nd game. Again, the Tigers only lost 2 games this year, one to South Carolina on their home floor, and to Tennessee in the Southeastern Conference tournament. USC is a juggernaut when it comes to college women's basketball. And let me ask you about the Tigers right now, because again, Kim Mulkey has done a great job in turning this, as we all thought she would, coming back home. But again, to be in this position so quickly.
Yeah, it's incredible, and the transfer portal work was huge, as it has been across all college sports really, as we've been going through. But watching the Lady Tigers go out there and play their brand of basketball and sort of enforce their will. You look at the game against Utah as well as the game against Miami. These are low-scoring games against Utah, who was a top 5 scoring team, along with LSU. So LSU hasn't been scoring as well. That's what you really want to see them fix as they go up against Virginia Tech in the Final Four. Is can they get back to scoring over on their offensive side, but then also continue to maintain sort of this defensive presence that they've had. So they're so exciting to watch, and it's been an incredible turnaround so far for Kim Mulkey.
And again, it's just the beginning of a long run for the LSU Lady Tigers now, with her in place. I said before, they were talking about naming courts and statues. Y'all might as well go ahead and get the Kim Mulkey statue ready, because it's coming. It's coming, no doubt. On the men's side, and this is really what Ross and I were kind of talking about. Transfer portal has changed college athletics all the way across the board. Football, basketball, baseball, I don't care what sport it is right now. You have the ability to change. Look what Tulane did last year with the 10 transfer portal players they brought in on the football side, and how that changed the dynamics of their team. Ended up a Cotton Bowl berth, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. You look at, again, now LSU, what they've done in the transfer portal, especially with Brian Kelly's first year coming in. McMahon with the basketball team, not so much. Again, went for more mid-major players when you really got to have a more high caliber player in the SEC. And of course, Coach Sless is not a guy that dabbles in the transfer portal, but that's got to kind of change now, especially after what we're seeing now with, again, the men's Final Four. And of course, Ron Hunter not afraid to be able to go in that transfer portal to be able to augment his roster. Florida Atlantic, the 9th seed, taking on the 5th seed, San Diego State. UConn, the 4th seed, taking on Miami. This is all a product when you look at these 4 teams. And these are not blue bloods. Maybe UConn's the closest thing to a blue blood because of the transfer portal.
That's it. That's been the thing that's allowed them to get the work done over the course of the last little bit. And I think that's such a huge piece because, look, even UConn being sort of this historied franchise, this history blue blood franchise, right? Having, being able to recruit was so important back then in terms of bringing men's and women's basketball players up from high school and into the thing. Now you get to kind of treat it like NFL free agency in a way, or NBA free agency in a way, and see people who are working at the level that you're playing and who are working and making it happen against your same level of competition, and then potentially bring them to your program. It's huge.
And on the flip side, and you got to do is look at the Final Four right now. Also going after the international players in basketball. I mean, again, from the continent of Africa to in Europe. It doesn't matter now. Basketball is an international sport. Yep. Going back to maybe the Dream Team way back when, right, 1992. Now you see the opportunity to be able to go out and you can fill it. You get one or two really good players, you turn the fortunes of a college basketball program around. A little different in football, a little bit more different in baseball, but in basketball, two really good players, you could turn it around.
Absolutely. Look, we're sitting here talking about San Diego State.
Right.
And, you know what I mean? We're not
Florida
talking
Atlantic.
about We're not talking about Duke and UNC and these big ACC powerhouses.
And they go for the one and doneers, right?
That's right. They're focused on getting these kids in and out, right? Like, can we get the best player that's going to give us one good year of basketball before they move on to the league? And certainly that's an approach. But now you're starting to see, like, maybe there's something to having players that are a little bit more experienced come to your program, who have the experience of playing at that level and being able to do what they've done here for guys like teams like Florida Atlantic and San Diego State. It's wild.
I mean, I don't even know where Florida Atlantic is. Seriously. Okay, but I mean, at the end of the day, we saw this change in college basketball for a while now with mid-majors, right? The ability to hold on to players for 3, 4, 5 years, and then when they get to the tournament, they're battle tested. Now you're having a situation where those guys, instead of staying 3, 4 years at one school, they're saying, wait a minute, this looks pretty good here. I can transfer without having to sit out. And of course, it's changed the dynamics of college basketball. Pels 38-38 right now. They're in 8th place. They won 5 in a row. And I told you guys to pump the brakes on this. 4 cupcakes, right? Okay, they beat the Clippers without Paul George. I'm giving them credit on that one. Just a really tough loss against Golden State as they kind of poked the bear there. And, Draymond Green completely out of control. And, of course, something needs to be said with again, the officiating, not throwing him out of that game after his behavior. But with that said, 7 games left. Again, 6-6 against the West. You're looking at Denver tonight, and then the last homestand of the year. Clippers at home on next week, followed by Sacramento, which is a back-to-back with Memphis, the New York Knicks, and then they finish up at Minnesota. The conference record, their record head-to-head right now, it looks like they have a shot to make the playoffs. But you never know what's going to happen here in this last week of the season. I am interested to see, after the way they took the 20-point lead against the Golden State Warriors, and then of course losing the game in the second half, where the Warriors started playing Warriors basketball, and of course all the extracurricular activity that went into that game, how they play tonight against Denver. Denver's the best team in the West right now. Are they going to come back strong? Are we going to see a rebound here? And then, of course, the big question is, will we see Zion Williamson next week?
Yeah, that's the big one. And I think maybe it depends on how they wrap up this week, right? How do they wrap up against the Denver Nuggets here? Look, you have phenomenal basketball players in Denver. And, Draymond, who is this big, imposing force. Well, you've got Nikola Jokic over there waiting for you. And talk about a big, imposing force. I mean, this guy's he's back-to-back MVP?
Yeah, right.
I mean, he's an incredible player. And he's somebody that gets under people's skin, just like Draymond. So can you keep it together? Can you go out there and show that you can play and wrestle around with sort of the big dogs here? Because you couldn't get it done against the Warriors after, that 5-game win streak that was, let's face it was tilted in their favor. And so can you go out there and be the team that you want to show that you can be up against the biggest and the best? And if you can be, then I think it gets that Zion Williamson. Every player, depending on how things are going, maybe the pain tolerance ticks up a little bit, or maybe the injury tolerance ticks up a little bit. I mean, if they get that win, there's a lot of motivation for Zion Williamson to get back out on that court as quickly as he can. Not that he's wanting to be off the court, but it makes a big difference when you have and see that type of fight from your teammates.
Ross, you and I play ball. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm Zion. I see what happened the other night against Golden State. They got to literally handcuff me to the bench for me not to be playing tonight. 100%. I mean, again, I know they have not announced this yet. I know they stick to their guns in terms of, again, when they're going to have a player that's going to be reevaluated. But I'm doing everything I can with Aaron Nelson, David Griffin, with Coach Green to say I need to be on the floor tonight. We've only got a few games left, and getting back on the floor. How they do that with, again, the point forward position, I've got into it on the radio show. Listen to my podcast, and you'll be able to see that. We don't have enough time time to get into that today, but we'll get into that a little bit later on again, when he comes back, how he's going to coexist with Brandon Ingram, who has kind of taken over that port forward position. But that's for another day.
You could see that look in Zion's eyes on the sideline.
Oh,
too.
I mean,
he was ready to get in.
you kidding me? You want to get in? and why would you?
Right.
I mean, again, you see what happened, and you saw, again, your team lose that type of game in the second half, and you can make a difference.
Make a difference,
Okay,
absolutely.
so again, I'd love to see it. I don't think we're going to see it tonight. I think we'll see it next week. But again, you would have had you'd have to hold me back with horses to be able to stop me from getting back in the game tonight. You went to Tulane's Pro Day last week. The first time, again, in my memory, I can remember all 32 teams being at Tulane's Pro Day. How impressed were you?
Very. Extremely. I thought there were several different things that impressed me. There were the players.
Right.
Obviously, Nick Anderson, Dorian Williams, getting to see their sort of relationship play out. Such good culture players that Dorian Williams told us after when we did our little presser with him that the team really emphasizes culture over scheme. That culture can win games, and you can see it during that Tulane Pro Day. Tajay Spears going out and helping himself massively. Talked to a couple of the NFL scouts that were there. Anywhere between a 4.47 to a 4.5 is often where you find that 40-yard dash, which he didn't run at the combine. And so, but tested extremely well in every other category. So that's huge in terms of his stock as well. But beyond that, Willie Fritz out there walking around talking with everybody. Maddie Hudak, who was on the show here last week, she and the broadcast crew, doing great work for ESPN Plus, who was out there broadcasting this Tulane Pro Day. I mean, goodness gracious. And then the turnout for it being open to the public, the organization of it all, they cared so much. And Tulane, I don't want to say looked like, but this was a display for Tulane to kind of plant a flag in the ground and say, we are a legitimate program here in the city of New Orleans that is producing NFL talent. Come and see us. And it worked.
I want to ask you about two players. Nick Anderson had his Sam Mills jersey on.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Again, kind of letting people know, hey, there was a guy that was pretty good over here that can play at that size. Is the size going to hurt him in the NFL, in your opinion?
I think it depends on the scheme that, it depends.
He was a very productive player in college.
Extremely productive. And if you look at a team like, let's say, the Philadelphia Eagles, they like smaller safeties. They love smaller linebackers that are kind of the size of safeties. They love having speed over on the defensive side, explosion over on the defensive side. And when he jumped, I believe it was an 11-1 broad jump, if I remember correctly, seeing him and, Dorian Williams go crazy, celebrating with one another and everything, that's a culture display. And so when you see sort of the personality of the player, you see the great athletics testing, and then if you're a program like, let's say, the Philadelphia Eagles or the Buffalo Bills or a couple of others that kind of like some of those smaller athletic linebackers, and then you see all these intangible qualities mixed in with the tangible qualities of being a high-level producer at his level, the size ends up becoming a benefit because you fit the scheme. And so maybe there are fewer teams that look at it that way, but with the success of players like Quan Alexander in the league, Tremaine Edmonds in the league, and others, there's a lot of display out there to be able to say, hey, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be productive. Look at Nakobe Dean last year. Where did he end up? Philadelphia Eagles. That's a big spot.
Everybody in New Orleans would love to see Tajay Spears in the Saints uniform.
Including Tajay.
Where do you think he is? Second round, third round? Does he fall to the fourth round? What do you think?
Yeah, it's so tough because
the draft is pretty good for running backs, right?
It's great for running backs. This is a fantastic running back class. Israel Abanikanda, another guy from Pittsburgh who just put himself on the map with a blazing pro day. He was outstanding, so maybe that impacts things. And these running backs are so tightly wound in terms of where their draft prospects are that oftentimes they end up impacting one another pretty often. And so here's the way that I look at it, because the running back position is so volatile in the NFL, and particularly in the NFL draft, where teams feel like they can get a fifth-round guy. Or look at Isaiah Pacheco last year, seventh-round guy out of Rutgers, became the top running back in Kansas City. And so I think that ends up potentially pushing some of these running backs down. We'll see about Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs out of Texas and Alabama, respectively, where they fall. They're kind of the pacers of that running back class. But then after that, second, third, fourth, fifth round, you're going to see a lot of these running backs go. I think Tajay is the best of the next after you get past Bijan and Jahmyr. But look, Roschon Johnson's in there, Dwayne McBride's in there, Israel Abanikanda's in there. There's a lot of really, really good running backs in this class, and so it's going to be interesting to see how they all shake out. But I think he's somewhere in that range of 2, 3, 4. It just depends upon the valuation of the position by the NFL teams relative to who else is on the board at the same time.
I don't want to get into LSU Pro Day. A lot of players. I just want to ask you about one. Okay, Keyshawn Boutte. Really great early career with the Tigers. Has been injury prone the last couple of years. Didn't really play up to his normal standards last year. Where do you project him? Is he a guy that's going to be hurt by what's happened over the last couple of seasons? Is he going to drop? Is he an NFL receiver in your opinion?
I think that's the big question. Is he an NFL receiver? And if you have to ask that question, then usually things don't shake out very well. I think the injuries and him not being able to be out on the field, the lack of production over the past couple of years, it hurts. Some of the, I'll just say, alleged off the field extracurriculars, those things are going to have an impact. Him not really participating or testing in his pro day and resting on the combine numbers, which let's face it, were disappointing, right? I don't even think he cracked 30. I think he had a sub 30 vertical leap, and if you're a wide receiver, explosiveness is a huge part of your game. And so I'd love to sit here and say, well, maybe Jaden Daniels and him just didn't have the chemistry, and the ball placement issues that Jaden had early on in the season are reflecting on Boutte because he wasn't there when things really got rolling for Jaden in that offense. Maybe, but I mean, you look at the testing, you look at some of the alleged extracurricular stuff, you look at all these things, teams are going to take all of this into account. So now he's having to rest on his numbers at his pro day, what he was able to do at LSU, and interviews. That's going to be a huge thing for him. So what happens behind those closed doors at interviews has the ability to really massively impact his stock.
Almost felt like he should have came back for another year over at LSU. All right, let's get into I want to really kind of deep dive in the last 7 minutes that we have in the program on what the Saints have done in free agency. Saunders Shepard, you kind of touched on it. When you compare and contrast what they lost in Onyemata and Tuttle to what they brought in at a cheaper price, by the way. Okay. Well, how do you think the Saints did? And these players, the fit in the scheme as well.
Yeah, I think that they, in terms of the on paper, looking at it, we have to see how it translates out on the field, of course. But on paper, I think they came out pretty well here. In terms of the run game, if you compare the 2 phases of the game, or if you compare just 2 phases of the game, run game, passing game, or pass rush, these guys are effectively the same as the guys that they're replacing when it comes to their 2022 productivity in the run game. Colin Saunders as well as Shai Tuttle literally tied with one another in terms of run stop percentage. Nathan Shepard a little bit higher ranking, but not by much, like 4 spots or so. But then you look at the pass rush win rate and their production in the pass rush game. As I mentioned earlier with David Onyemata versus Nathan Shepard, you have a 16 spot improvement there into the top 10 with Nathan Shepard. With Colin Saunders, you have a 30 spot difference and a 30 spot rise in terms of pass rush win rate versus Shai Tuttle. So what you're seeing is the Saints effectively saying they want to be a little bit more of an attacking interior pass rush. And I think you help yourself with that by retaining Malcolm Roach as well, who can also help out very well in the run game, but can be disruptive. And then I think you still have to get some work done there. You can continue to focus on the run side. There's guys like A'Shawn Robinson, formerly of the Los Angeles Rams, out there who'd be a fantastic fit for them. And we saw one of the contracts that was just recently signed for a defensive tackle in, I believe it was Cincy, might have been elsewhere, but just earlier this week. That ended up being, it was like a 1-year, $3 million deal. Now is the time to pounce back into that, into that market or after the draft. So I think they can help themselves there. But with the guys that they brought in, you can see that there's a little bit of a lean towards the pass rush productivity with the guys that they were replacing.
What are they getting in Williams, the running back they brought in from Detroit?
You get a guy that's fantastic in short yardage situations, but is not limited to that. Just because Detroit used him that way doesn't mean that's the only part of his game. Remember, before he was in Detroit, he was with Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers, and he was kind of splitting time with Aaron Jones. And he was as much of a pass catcher out of the backfield as he was anything else. Averaged around, I believe it's just under 40 catches per season, including the 2 seasons where he was working in Detroit, no one was throwing him the football, So I think you get that with him. You get a guy that also, I wouldn't be surprised if he slims down. I think 224 is where he was at throughout most of 2022. Wouldn't be surprised if he's more in the 217, 220 range by the the time that the season starts for the Saints, depending upon how they want to utilize him. But if you think about the things that they struggled with in 2022, they struggled finishing drives. They struggled sometimes in those short distance situations, even though they had the pieces to be able to get that done. And they struggled being able to cap off and extend drives.
Yes.
And I think Jamal Williams helps you with all of those, every one of those places where you struggled last year.
Seems to be a great locker room guy as well.
A phenomenal locker room guy. I said on my show, he's a perfect fit for New Orleans. Not just the team, but the city. Phenomenal fit.
Beautiful. 3 one-year deals with Norton, the offensive lineman, who's a swing guy. Abram, who was a great safety at Mississippi State, but a guy that struggled in coverage in the NFL. And then Johnson Jr., who again can play multiple positions for you, but he has struggled tackling. Talk about those 3.
Yeah, I think what you're looking at here is, let's start with Lonnie Johnson. Lonnie Johnson, the defensive back, who comes in, Kentucky Wildcat, played in the SEC in college, bounced around quite a bit across the NFL, was kind of chasing Tyrann Mathieu a little bit, ended up in Houston after Tyrann had left, ended up in Kansas City after Tyrann had come to New Orleans. And so I think when you look at where he contributes, it's the versatility.
Right.
I don't know if P.J. Williams is back this year after several one-year deals. If he's not, Lonnie Johnson is your replacement for P.J. Williams.
How big of a loss would it be to lose a P.J. Williams?
Because of the versatility of a Lonnie Johnson, it makes it a little bit better, but you want to see him improve in tackling because P.J. Williams is a little bit of an underrated asset in the run game in particular, right? And so I think that Lonnie Johnson has to improve the tackling, and the Saints have to help him improve that, which I think they showed during last season an ability to improve tackling over the course of the year. Needed to get that done before the season, but throughout the season I think they got better there. So I think Lonnie Johnson gives you that. Jonathan Abram gives you a fantastic another locker room guy, gives you another really, really good leader over on the defensive side, and the exact opposite in terms of concerns with tackling. You worry about him tackling too hard sometimes. You remember, remember a couple of years ago, he flew into the TV cart playing against the Saints on Monday Night Football, and it was a big concerning moment. And so, now he's the guy that kind of like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, you want to rein him in as a tackler a little bit, but they've done that really, really well. So I think there's that piece, but he's not going to be a coverage guy for you. He's going to be more of a box safety for you. And then when it comes to Storm Norton, we'll see what he's able to be. He had an opportunity starting several games 2 seasons ago for the Chargers. That dropped off last year, and so you worry about that a little bit. So get him in the camp, see what he can do. Maybe he's quality depth for you.
Brian Edwards.
And then Brian Edwards gives you another big physical pass catcher, 6'3", 215 pounds, has chemistry with the quarterback, which I think is really important, right? Him and Derek Carr had a great 2021 season together. He's really, really productive in places where the Saints offense will ask him to be productive. Curls, hitches, working back towards the quarterback, dig routes coming across the field from one side to the other. So he is kind of a guy that you can line up on the outside, that you can have play a big slot role for you in some physical situations, and can go and maybe win some of those 50-50 catches for you as well.
1 minute left. What are the needs left that the Saints have to be able to fill those holes, either before the draft or after the draft?
Yeah, defensive line is a big part of it. Both defensive tackle and edge rusher. You want to continue to pump in competition there. Saints did that really well last year in camp. I think they can do that again here. Probably still want to continue to focus on running back. We don't know what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara, right? He's got his trial set during training camp, and the NFL Code of Conduct policy says that for things that are relevant to the alleged assault, aggravated assault, all the things that he dealt with there, that ends up being at least a 6-game suspension. Deshaun Watson got 11 for his transgressions, so I would say somewhere between 6 and 10 feels right, no matter what happens in the legal process. So I think you're still looking for another running back to help there, and then you want to improve linebacker depth. I think that's another place. The loss of Caden Ellis is a lot of potential in that loss, but still quality depth that you lost there.
Do you think that they will be, with about 30 seconds left, as they've been in the past, very active in the draft, targeting players, moving up? Their board is smaller than most teams, right?
Yeah. They operate pretty economically throughout the draft, and because of that, they don't operate so economically when it comes to those draft picks. They're willing to move, deal, get everything done to go and get the guys that they want to go and get. They've got quite a few roster spots left. Look for them to be pretty active, maybe draft fewer players than they actually have picks. That wouldn't surprise me, but then be really, really active undrafted free agency and free agency post-draft as well.
10 to 15 million is still available right now to be able to use?
Yeah, there's somewhere in that range, and then you probably consider about 3 to 4 million, 3 to 5 million for the draft class. And so they're still hovering around good amount of money to spend and carry into the season.
Beautiful. let the audience know how they can find you on your podcast and, of course, where you're writing as well.
Absolutely. Locked on Saints podcast you can find every single Monday through Friday on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Just search Locked on Saints. Find all the written work as well over at CrescentCitySports.com, at CCS Daily over on Twitter, as well as the Saints Wire on Twitter and at SaintsWire.usatoday.com. Easiest way to find all of it, though, just follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. Keep it nice and tidy for you all in one place.
Thank you, Ross.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Ross Jackson again with us today here on the program. Don't forget, again, plenty of ways to catch our program now. QR code on your screen. Hit that with your cell phone. You can go to my website, ericasher.com, or the WLAE-TV YouTube page, and you'll be able to catch the program at your leisure. Also, don't forget, again, all the rebroadcasts we have. Again, just set your DVR on your favorite one. You'll never miss the program. As well as, again, checking us out on the radio, 4 to 6 weekdays on 106.1 FM, Nash Icon. You can listen to the iHeartRadio app, the TuneIn Radio app. Those are our digital platforms at ericasher.com, and also the Nash 106.1 website. Our podcast is everywhere. Anchor, Spotify, our home base for all podcasting platforms. Search Inside New Orleans Show with Eric Asher. And, of course, join us the conversation on our social media platforms as well. I want to thank our underwriters who make this program possible. Please support our underwriters, each and every one of them. And, of course, also, again, to the production staff here at WLAE-TV, which includes Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Raffia, Alex Chacon, and our director, William Hill. Great job once again by Ross Jackson. For Ross Jackson, I'm Eric Asher. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you back here next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.